Adolf Hitler, the Führer, dictator of Nazi Germany, along with Mao and Stalin, one of the most evil killer leaders of the 20th century. The Treaty of Versailles ended World War I. The treaty stripped defeated Germany of territory, of weapons, and what was left of its economy. Hitler was provoked to write his book, Mein Kampf, in English, My Struggle, where he laid out his plan for a new world order. His Nazi party would restore Germany and take over Europe.
You know, I was a young guy also in those days, but I think their aim was how to, by political measures, you know, get an improvement of the whole situation, means primarily economically, politically. And no member of any other party was idolized like Hitler in his party. He was a great leader, you know? And nothing, no word against him, no critique against him. What he said, this was right. Know that.
First thing that was implemented by Hitler after he had taken to power was a Ministry of Propaganda. And under this ministry, all of the information industry had been centralized within half a year. That is, there was only one radio channel that was completely controlled by the Nazis, and all of the print industry, all newspapers, all magazines were under control of a censor that sat in the Ministry of Propaganda. It was strictly forbidden by law to listen to foreign radio stations, to radio stations outside Germany. So the first thing they tried was to limit the Germans' view on the outside world and make them think in the direction the Nazi Party had decided the people should think to.
In fiery speeches, day and night, to thousands, he preached two great evils, Judaism and communism. Over 6 years, Hitler built an overwhelmingly powerful and tactically brilliant military force, ground, sea, and air.
The Me-109, also called the Bf-109, was Nazi Germany's most important fighter aircraft, both in operational importance and in numbers produced. It was arguably the best fighter in the world in 1940. It was faster than the Spitfire at high altitude, could dive more rapidly, and carried a more effective armament of 2 cannon and 2 machine guns. The beginning of the end of the Me-109 as an unparalleled force of aviation began in August 1942 with the introduction of American heavy bombers, such as the B-17, that gave the Allies the ability to bring the fight into German territory. The entire war for the Luftwaffe had been offensive, and because of this, only 2 109 units were stationed to defend the Reich. On top of this, German pilots had never encountered a bomber like the B-17 that could take such a punishment as well as dish it out. The introduction of the P-51 Mustang to the European theater in the spring of 1944 marked the end of the Luftwaffe's air superiority over Europe. Both aircraft here today are remarkable examples of years and thousands of hours of hard work by dedicated expert technicians. And both, without the support of their owners, would be lost. Bringing World War II's aircraft back to life is full of challenges and excitement. We thank all our Warbird members and teams of talented specialists that keep them flying, preserving aviation history for future generations.
What do you think, folks? Pretty good video, huh? That was Scott Guyette and Sleeping Dog Productions. And welcome back. I was here this morning. I was here yesterday, day before, and I appreciate you all being here. The crowd seems to be growing, and that's a very good thing. This is a very unique opportunity that we have today. I'm not sure we've ever done the Zoom the way we're doing it with Kurt. And Kurt, welcome. Glad to see you again. Thank you very much for being here. He's going to be kind of our local, no, I shouldn't say, our long-range expert. And I'll say now, Kurt, if you hear something that you think is maybe incorrect or well, in the Air Force, we used to call it the BS flag, okay? So if you see or hear something, just you can wave your finger, and we'll make believe that's, and we'll come back to you. But we all know who he is at this point. The rest of the team here that we've got, and we've really got two teams. We got 2 airplanes, 2 teams, and we're going to be talking about each one. Each one is a little bit different. The acquisition, the airplanes themselves, and yeah, we're going to ask Kurt in a little bit to just get into some of the history. I had a Zoom call with Kurt, I guess about a week ago or so, and he is an absolute wealth of information. And I'll say now, the way things are going to work, we're going to talk about Kurt first with a little bit of the history of the airplane, its inception, its evolution. Then we're going to get into, each airplane and the acquisition of each airplane, what happened to it? How did it go down? Where did it go down? How did we get it here? The restoration of the airplane, talk to some of the pilots of the airplane, do a little bit of a walk around on the airplane, and then we're going to open it up to questions. And with the questions, Kurt's going to be part of that also. So we've got, again, a wealth of information here available to us, and please be patient with us. I'm not a professional at this. Connie talked me into it, I don't know, a couple years ago, I guess. And if you remember that voice that you just heard on the video, that was David Hartman. And something that David told me was, hey, when you do this kind of stuff, Ed, you probably only want to have like 3 guys up here. And well, do the math, because right now we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and Kurt. So we've got 6 right now. So it's going to be, yeah, a little bit of a challenge for me, but I'm going to do my best. And I'll start with just basic introductions here. The first guy I got on my left, his name is Doc Winters, and he is the owner of, let's see, eeny, meeny, miny, that one right there, okay? That is his. He is the pilot of it also. And I asked him briefly, I hate guys like this because they're overachievers. You know, he goes to school, he gets a medical degree, then he decides, oh no, I want to go out and be a fighter pilot. So he goes through OCS with the Navy, turns into an F-18 pilot, and then comes back and, becomes an eye doctor, correct? Okay, an ophthalmologist. And oh, by the way, now he's got a Warbird. So that's the guy here, and we're going to be asking him for some numbers and impressions of the airplane. But that's our first guy, and I'll just ask him to introduce the guy alongside him, who's the second member of the team.
Am I on?
You're on.
This is Mike Vadabancure. He runs Midwest Aero Restorations, and they're responsible for this beautifully restored original aircraft. And Dave Young and Steve Schultz are out there too. The 3 of them basically did it all.
Okay, thank you. Jim Nartinelli is next. Director of Operations, Erickson Aircraft, and he again is responsible for a great deal of that airplane over there. So Jim, I'll let you introduce your team.
Yeah, next to me is Doug Griffin. Doug is our 109 pilot. He's acquired a lot of 109 time this summer. He's flown the 109 from Oregon all the way to Detroit and then back to here. And next to him is David Reed, our Director of Maintenance, and David is responsible for the mechanical restoration of the 109.
Okay, thanks for the introductions. And Kurt, I'm going to turn it over to you for a minute here and just let you give somewhat of a history of the airplane, its inception, what it was supposed to do at first, and how it evolved to, these beautiful airplanes that we see in front of us.
Yeah, okay. Well, it's a Messerschmitt, so everything starts with Willy Messerschmitt, its designer. He was only 36 years old when the Me-109 took off for its first flight. A guy who was was obsessed with optimized airframe structures. Just to give you a practical example, I'm pretty confident, for example, Mike might elaborate more on that. If you have a look at the attachment points of the main landing gear, these also are the attachment points of the engine mounting, of the lower engine mounting. So when the plane touches to the ground, the forces that are imposed on the landing gear are neutralized by the momentum that comes from the engine. He was always thinking in ways to optimize airframe structures, and of course, a requirement that came from the Luftwaffe was the fighter plane should be easily road and rail transportable, having in mind that if you crash land the plane, it should be easy to be recovered and brought back to operations as soon as possible. The production history is also an important point. The Me-109 was relatively easy to produce, so all in all, I think 33,000 have been produced, with only a handful to survive, and to my knowledge only one example, which is totally original, which had been recovered by the Royal Air Force in the North African desert in 1942 and then kept by the Imperial War Museum in London, and had been flying until I think 15 years ago. That was Willy Messerschmitt, who had in mind to build a lightweight fighter. And on the customer side, so to say, at the Luftwaffe, you also had two key people which were decisive for the Me-109's history. One of them was Ernst Udet, the second highest scoring ace in World War I after the famed Red Baron with 62 kills, being now the director of the technical office of the Air Ministry. And the other one was Robert von Greim, also a World War I ace, at 28 kills, who was heading the fighter department of the Air Ministry. These two guys had the intellectual capacity to draw the right conclusions from the incredible massive dogfights they had in World War I. And the main conclusion was, dogfights are nothing for average pilots. Regardless of the nations, every nation had lost too many pilots in dogfights. So their idea of let's have a fighter that is so superior that even an average pilot may score without being pulled into a dogfight met Messerschmitt's passion for lightweight design. And that was the birth point of the 109. The outcome was a relatively light fighter with superior performance in dives and in climbs, and of course in acceleration and in speed, having high-speed wing airfoil, which was not as good performing at low speeds, but for that reason, Messerschmitt had designed mechanically operated slats, which you can see here on the airplanes, which were pushed into the leading edge of the wings when the airflow was tough enough, and which were popping out of the wings or slowly coming out of the wings when the airflow decreased. That helped to control the 109 in low speeds. As for the production history and as for the combat history, just a few brief remarks. And please, General, give me a sign when I'm going overboard. In the first 4 years of the 109's operational history, everything seemed to be confirmed by the war in Spain and by the war in Poland and in France. But there, the 109 only met inferior opposition like Russian biplanes or relatively slow Polish or French fighters, which had something between 50 to 80 knots less top speed than the 109, and then it was easy, of course, to go for hit-run combats, and all of these Messerschmitt pilot. The whole thing turned with the Battle of Britain. There, the 109 met Hurricanes and Spitfires. And now look at the Spitfire. The Spitfire was a dogfighter by design. Look at that beautiful little wing. Look at the higher wing area, which made the Spitfire maneuverable over a much wider range of speed. That was the reason why, in an infuriated debate with the chief of the German Luftwaffe, Hermann Göring, one of the wing commanders of the German Luftwaffe, later to become General of Fighters, Adolf Galland, upon Göring's question, Galland, what do you need to really cope with the Britons? Replied, give me a squadron of Spitfires. Was back on the top of the agenda again, and 109 wasn't much of a good dogfighter. It could be easily outturned by the Spitfire. For that reason, Messerschmitt tried to turn the 109 into a dogfighter, and that was the so-called Friedrich version, or Fox in today's alphabet. And the cowling had been smoothened, the elevator struts had been done away with, the landing, the tail wheel had been made retractable. So here you had the best you could get in airflow of a 109, and for the dyed-in-the-wool dogfighters of the Luftwaffe, of which Gunther Rall was one, whom Connie had mentioned before, the F version really was what they longed for. I once talked about the F and the several 109 versions with Gunther Rall, and he said, you know, Kurt, flying the F in combat, that was like foil fencing. That was really a capable weapon in the hand of a man who has seat of the pants, who has good spatial orientation, and who is a capable deflection shooter. That was the F. Then the tides turned. Germany was in the defensive. The 109, which was originally designed for being just a pure fighter, became assigned multi-roles, fighter bomber, all the like. The heavy weapons returned because they had to fight the B-17s. And then it was obvious by 1943, 1944, it had reached the end of its development potential. It's still in the hands of a capable pilot. It still was a respectable weapon, but in the hands of an average pilot, it was not a match for the Mustangs and for other Allied fighters anymore. General, I hope I wasn't too long.
I lost my mic. Oh. And you guys knew all that, right? You knew, yeah. They're just nodding their head, going, "Yeah, okay." Thank you, Kurt. And please stand by. We're going to have some more questions for you for sure. But that gives you a quick idea of where the airplane came from, you know. And me being a former Air Force fighter pilot, that's the kind of airplane I'd want to fly back then. It's like, hey, you know, if I'm a mediocre fighter pilot, what do I want? I want a better airplane so I can beat the other guy out there. And not only that, but he mentioned the fact that, hey, you know, does he want a dogfight with a guy? No, you don't want a dogfight with a guy. You want to kill him, hey, on a, you know, either a high deflection gunshot and get out of there, or the current day, you know, hey, these F-22s, you know, they're blowing the other guys up 30 miles away, and the other guy doesn't even know they're there. So yeah, what he says absolutely makes sense for that era. And then, hey, we get down to the actual airplanes right now. And I'm going to start with Doc and just say the first question that I have is acquiring this airplane. It's got a very interesting story. I think you all will appreciate it. So, Doc, go ahead. Give me an idea of where this thing came from.
So, like he said, there's 33,000, but there are very few actual authentic restorations left in the world. Most of the ones you've read about are E-models. That Black 6 he discussed 15 years ago was started in the 70s and 80s, and it flew for about 15 years in England, and then they stopped flying, and it was truly authentic too. This was recovered from a lake in Estonia. It was the former Eastern Front for the Germans as they were retreating in 1944. Lake Swilbo in 1990, the pilot was returning to his base and was hit and mortally wounded the airplane. He was okay. He just set it down on a lake, slid out on that ice lake to the very western edge, and jumped out and ran west. And it sank as the spring thaws came in 1944, and no one ever recovered or no one knew about it until after the wall came down and the Russians decided to make some money and sell some things. They pulled this out in 1990 and took it to Moscow and showed it around for a little while, and then it changed hands about 5 times and ended up not a lot done to it, just the original, all the original parts, airframe, everything, just changed hands. No one really restored it until we did. We got it from a gentleman in Munich in 2012, and it took 10 years.
Wow. Wow. And then the restoration started, and how long was the restoration process?
10 years.
That's
when you're, I mean, they produced the most beautiful Mustangs in the entire world, and they did the Happy Jacks Go Buggy for me, and to transition and try to translate as a mechanical engineer into a totally different language, totally different tooling, totally different aspect. It was a really rough and challenging ball game for them, and they did it really well.
Okay, and what model is this?
It's a G6.
It's a G6, okay. And I look, does it have leading edge slats on it?
It has aerodynamic slats. They're based on basically aerodynamic forces. They'll deploy or not, depending upon what the wing sees as far as air.
Okay, and I'll ask Kurt, how does that compare with the E that you were just talking about? Is this the next generation, if you will? Is this a better airplane than that E model that you were just talking about?
Yeah, well, the G6, of course, picked up weight because it had got heavier armament. It was a capable airplane still, but it had to fulfill too many purposes for its original design. It had to serve as a fighter against other fighters. It had to serve again as a fighter against other bombers. That is, that explains the heavier armament. And it wasn't as easy to fly due to its increased takeoff weight as the E and the former versions and the F had been. The slats were a special thing. I recall a talk with Gunther Rall, who was so much a fan of the 109F, but he never got really familiar with the slats. Being a dogfighter, you know, in high bank turns, the lower wing slat used to pop out when the airflow decreased, while the higher wing slat still had been pressed into the leading edge, which finally ended up in the airplane flipping over just when you were about to get the other guy. So for a while, Gunther had the slats riveted into the leading edge of the wing to make good for that. But as the war in the East advanced and they were forced to move forward and forward to smaller airfields, to soft ground airfields, he could not just do away with the slats because there he needed low landing speeds.
Understand. Thank you. All right, Jim, how about acquisition of your airplane? What, tell us that story.
Yeah, so, am I on? Our airplane was born as a Spanish Buchon and was flown by the Spanish military until the movie The Battle of Britain. And at that time, the movie production acquired most of the Spanish Air Force's 109s and Heinkel 111s to produce the movie Battle of Britain. One of the pilots who flew in the Battle of Britain movie was Connie Edwards. At the end of the production, Connie ended up with a large amount of those airframes, of the 109s. Brought them to Texas, stored them in Texas, and over the years, various collectors were able to get them. In the early 1990s, Mr. Erickson, who owns the airplane, struck a deal with Connie and purchased the airplane and brought it to Oregon and just assembled it and put it on static display. And in 2015, the decision was made to make it airworthy. And took us about 20 months to do what you see here from what we got.
Okay, talk about the engine a little bit. I think there's been some engine changes on this airplane, haven't there?
Yeah, so Dave will be able to give you more in depth on that. But when we were doing the airplane, the Merlin-powered Bouchon is kind of it just doesn't, it doesn't appeal to that clean 109 look. So Mr. Erickson was thinking, let's try to do something to get closer to what you see here with the Docks airplane. The decision was made to try an Allison. We mocked the Allison up in front of the airplane. We borrowed some G10 cowling from a friend of ours. And we realized we were able to put the Allison literally inside of unmodified G10 cowling. And the prop shaft ended up in the same exact location as where it was on the G10. So engineering was done to develop an engine mount and that stuff. And we put the Allison in it, and here it is.
The rest is history, huh?
Yeah.
Huh. All right. How about Doc? Talk about your motor a little bit. What's in that thing?
It's an original Daimler-Benz 605 Alpha, and it obviously is original because they didn't make any 605s after the war, so all the Daimler-Benzes you see flying are original engines. And there are several in Bouchons or closer airframes in Germany flying now, but they're very, very rare engines, and Mike Nixon spent a great deal of time and effort and is quite expert at restoring 605s and German engines. And this is probably his 7th or 8th, at least, 605 Daimler-Benz engine.
Wow. Okay. I got to ask Kurt, how about what's the reputation of that motor, of the 605? Was it a good motor? And how many hours could you expect out of it before you had to rebuild it? What was the opinion of the pilots of the motor?
Well, the pilots, of course, were very fine with the engine because it was, to my knowledge, the first airplane engine in mass production that comprised a mechanical fuel injection. That is, it was not really subject to negative G's. So if you had to evade from a fight, you just pushed the stick and then you were gone. While with the carburetor-fueled Merlin engines of the British, for example, you had to avoid negative G's, else your engine would go off for a couple of seconds. So the pilots always were very fine with the engine, but its reliability, of course, depended on the theater of war the airplane was in. You must imagine that if you fought on the very far southeast of the front in Europe, say on the Black Sea, the supply lines were pretty long, and due to the changing climate conditions, a sensitive engine like this high power 2,100 cubic inch 12-cylinder was not easy to maintain because just due to logistical affairs, or it flew also in the deserts of Africa, and there the time between overhaul was in the double digits.
How about temperatures? You mentioned it. Was it better in the cold? Was it better in the hot? Does it overheat on the ground? I know some of these airplanes do have problems in that regard. Does this have any of those problems?
Yeah, that might be. It might be better to ask one of the guys who really are the engine experts for that.
Yeah, you guys who fly it, any problems? Hey, getting the thing started and having to get it off the ground because it gets hot.
Well, the high-time pilot that I know of now in the world is a gentleman named Klaus Plaza in Germany, and he has 350 some odd hours, and he used to tell me it's about 8 to 12 minutes, depending on conditions, between startup and it overtemps and you can't take off.
Okay.
Regardless of really ambient temperature and or facing the wind or downwind or whatever. You just don't have a lot of time. And it's my understanding that the Spitfires are the same way. Those early airplanes, the Mark I, Mark II, they were designed to squadron to basically leave the assembly point, jump in your airplane, and take off the grass whichever direction you were. There was not a lot of Oshkosh taxiing.
Yeah. I understand. Mustangs have that problem too here a little bit, I think. But all right, good. Well, in that case, let's get into some of the pilot stuff, as Maverick or Goose would say, I guess, huh? And that movie, I think, is going to be out here on Friday night. I think they got Top Gun Maverick being shown. But anyway, in that regard, flying time. Who's got the most flying time in this thing? Yeah, they're pointing fingers. Okay, what do you think? Easy airplane to fly, tough airplane to fly. I just look at the landing gear and the distance to the tail. It looks a little bit close coupled, but not bad. Is it an easy tail dragger to fly or a hard tail dragger to fly?
No, you're absolutely right. That's my first impression as well. You look at the airplane; it's very intimidating. Evil-looking airplane, and it's like I don't know if I'm not so sure I want to fly it. It's intimidating, but I figured I'd give it a shot, and I got in it, and I absolutely love the airplane. It's not what you read about in the books in terms of landing mishaps and stuff. I just the way I fly it is just slow it up. I'm probably about 120 knots on base, slowing up to about 110 on short final, and probably 90 over the numbers. And I just hold it off until it's done flying in a 3-point attitude. And once it hits the ground, well, you can put your feet on the floor. It doesn't do anything weird.
You prefer doing a 3-point to a wheel landing?
Oh yeah, I would not wheel land this airplane.
Okay.
No, I would. I think it would be, with the gear geometry the way it is, and changing with the nose up and down, it would be a handful. Yeah. And plus, you look at it, the way how far forward the gear is, and the tail is really heavy on the ground, weight-wise. It is really heavy. So to have the tail up in the air, if the main's on the ground, you're going pretty good clip. So.
Okay, how about just basic cruise? First airspeeds. How fast? If you're cruising to come to Oshkosh, what were you cruising at?
Well, looking at FlightAware, I was doing about 250 knots, 240 knots.
Okay.
Across the ground.
Okay.
About 210 indicated.
Okay, and how much gas you burning? How many gallons an hour?
Both the Allison were burning 60 gallons an hour.
Okay. Yeah. And how about Doc and yours? Same thing?
Well, it's a 605. Kirk can correct me if I'm wrong. It's a much bigger engine than the Merlins and Allisons as far as displacement. I believe it's more in line with the class of the Griffin. So it inherently, since it's a bigger engine, it's going to use more fuel. And we're really young in the program, so don't have quite the numbers, but I'm sure it's in the 70s at least. But it's very quick across the ground as far as when you true it out nicely. And I run in all the German instruments in there, so I run in kph and kilometers, etc. But as far as the landing and characteristics and all that, it was designed, like Kurt said, to basically disassemble it with 3 or 5 guys, put the wings on the side, put it on a rail car, and go to where the front was. Because it's a very short-ranged fighter. It does not have a lot of gas, can't go anywhere, really. So, and that was an Achilles heel for it, of course, right at the Battle of Britain. They really found that out. But go back again. I was always thinking before I started flying it, I mean, you're not going to build a fighter for 10 years, 35 to really 45. They were putting them back together still with us bombing them. You're not going to build 33,000 if they're just an animal. I mean, they've got to be a good airplane, both takeoff, landing, and up in flight. And it is. And then the little experience I've had great people talking to me like Klaus Plaza on how to fly it. And I fly it in really nice conditions, and if you're staying on it, it's just fine. It tracks nicely, it sets down in 3-point just beautifully, it flies around the pattern like it lives there. So I find it to be quite enjoyable.
Okay. We've talked about acquisition. We've talked about a little bit about the restoration. I'll talk to the restoration guys here just a second and ask, what was the most difficult part about restoring these things? And I don't care, anybody. All of it? Okay. I mean, parts are probably not readily available, and if you do find them, they're probably very expensive, or you got to manufacture them yourself. Yeah, I would think it would be a tremendously difficult process.
Yeah, everything you've said is right on. And you know, another aspect that we've had to deal with was dealing with where these airplanes were built, and so we're dealing with people in Germany and Austria and some in the UK.
Careful now. We're dealing with people in Germany. Yeah.
And they've been a fantastic help. I mean, we wouldn't have been able to do it without our friends in Germany and Austria who have some corporate knowledge of operating these types of airplanes. So we could have done it without them. And like I said, we had our own set of challenges here, but when we run out of a part or we run into a roadblock, it's like, well, where do we go? Here in the States, I know where to go for P-51s and so forth, over to Europe. So that added the complexity there was more of time. How long is it going to take for them to make it, or have they made it, or how long is it going to get here, and are they really understanding what I am asking? So that's something we dealt with for 10 years.
I understand. How about gas? How much gas? Are both the same? How much does each one airplane hold?
Ours holds about 105 gallons.
Okay.
Yeah, ours is close to about 108, 110.
Same. So yeah. You're right. It's really a short range kind of airplane. You're not going to be up there very long. And yeah, interesting. All right. Other points of note, I guess, from a flying standpoint. You guys maneuvered, done acro. You know, is it a high G airplane? What's the G limit on these things? I know you're not going to take them up there, but when they were brand new, what was the G limit? Are we talking, 5, 7 Gs, something like that?
About 5 Gs on the airframe.
Okay. And you don't do that anymore, probably, right? I mean, most of the time.
We'll do aerobatics in it. No, it's a very nice flying airplane.
Okay. And are you guys flying at all during the show here? Are you going to be? I don't know the answer to that. No. You guys? Okay. So you're not going to see an Me-109 fly. All right. I'm going to turn it over to Kurt here for a minute because I know he's got some stories about a guy who flew these airplanes for a long time, was very successful, and I'm curious, Kurt, your relationship with that German ace named Gunther. I know you were involved with a book about Gunther. I know you've got a wealth of information involving the guy. I wish I'd had the opportunity to meet him, but yeah, you got a quick story about Gunther Rall, and I'll let you describe exactly who he is if the crowd doesn't know.
Yeah, well, Gunther Rall was one of the leading aces of World War II, having scored 275 kills. So I think he's the third highest scoring ace in the history of air warfare. If you have met him, you would have been surprised to have a relatively small, introvert, vivid, but not very extrovert or not very bragging or pretending guy, for me, he was the typical size of a fighter pilot. I cannot tell you in inches, but he was about 1 meter 75 centimeters. That seemed to be something like the standard size of a German fighter pilot, because guys of that size fitted exactly into the 109's cockpit. You should not be 6 feet tall. That's a bit too much for that airplane. Of course, he was like all fighter pilots. When we were talking about air combat, he needed at least 3 hands to show you how things happen in the air. I got to know him, I think, very well. And you know, if you have to do with these World War II fighter pilots, they all start with those old, colorful war stories. But if you get to know them better, you also get to know the more thoughtful side of these people and the way they think about war. And one thing that comes to my mind was when we were writing Gunther's biography, we were doing it in his beautiful home in Bad Reichenhall. And we had a working day with everything laid out on his kitchen table, as all fighter pilots. He wasn't very much of a guy that was happy to fill binders or something like that. He had everything, all the documents stored in a chest, and then we put it on the table, and I tried to sort it out while a recording device was on the table and we were talking about it. And then it was up to me to put that into proper German language. So we had a heavy working day, and after that was done, we were sitting on the porch. He poured every one of us a glass of whiskey, and for a while we were saying nothing. And then I turned over to him, and I saw tears running from his face. And I said, in these days, we were already on a first-name basis. I said, Gunther, what's the matter? And he says, you know what the real thing is about war? Of the 275 guys I've killed, I saw the faces of at least 200. And they haunt me at night because they were my age, they were looking like me, and when we were turning in on the Eastern Front, the combat altitudes were so low you did not have to wear an oxygen mask, so you could really see the other guy, and you knew in 2 or 3 minutes it would be over, finally, for one of either him or you. And with age, this haunts me more and more, it keeps me awake at night. And this was the other side of the guy. He could talk brilliantly about air combat. Even after World War II, he flew the FO-104. He introduced, in fact, the FO-104 to the German Air Force, and he had amassed a considerable number of hours in the FO-104. So he really represents quite a part of aviation, military aviation history. And he always was a fighter pilot. But he was also a very, very thoughtful guy.
Thank you. Interesting perspective, and something I don't think any of us knew of that man. I would ask, though, you mentioned the number of kills. I think people would be interested to know, yeah, he shot down a lot of airplanes, but he was also shot down. Is that not correct?
Yeah, I think he had to bail out 8 times, and he had one severe crash landing in Russia, an occasion at which he broke his back 3 times. So that brought him into hospital for 9 months. And the good thing about that hospital stay was there he met his wife, who was a medical doctor in that hospital. So they married. And then, of course, he would have had the opportunity to withdraw. He would have had the opportunity to fly a desk somewhere in the Air Ministry, but he returned to his squadron on the Eastern Front because he, at the age of 24, for the other guys, was the old man. He was the one who was the squadron commander, and he knew very well these guys relied on him as the old man. They were lost if he would not come back. So he returned to being a frontline pilot and had to fly with cushions for a while because when he touched down, that was very painful for him. And also in combat, positive high G maneuvers were painful, but finally he adapted and he made his career until he had scored 275 kills. And at the age of 27, this also amazes me over and over again. At the age of 27, he was in command of a fighter wing that comprised something like 120 fighters and 2,000 men. So these guys really had received a crash course in leadership in wartime. and that at incredible loss rates. He was one of the very few to survive who had flown in World War II from the first to the last day.
Okay.
If you met somebody like him, Gunther had something like 600 hours in missions, and on the 109, he still was a predator in such an airplane. Though the 109 was by that time, by the end of the war, was technically inferior to a Mustang.
As I remember, he also lost his thumb. Is that not correct? Didn't he have? He had his thumb shut off too. So quite an amazing man. All right, thank you, Kurt. We've got about 10 minutes left right now for the official program. I'm going to ask somebody in the group here to do a quick walk around, and we'll only do one airplane, so it doesn't really matter. But we got a okay, eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Okay, looks like it's your turn.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and do ours. I'll get up. So ours is the Allison-powered G10 variant of a 109, which is converted from a Spanish Buchan here, what you see behind us. And a number of challenges that we had with restoring this particular aircraft was just fitting the engine, like Jim had mentioned earlier. And with the Curtiss electric propeller, it has all original G10 cowling that we sourced from Eastern Europe, and then also the parts. Something that we thought about for a long time is we always wanted it to look authentic when the cowling is closed. So the exhaust was one of the most difficult parts of the restoration, being how it's lower and the header manifold system that you see here. And getting it to really come out in the same spot. Using the induction scoop as the Allison's the downdraft carburetor. And another problem with running the Allison, like they were talking about earlier, is the overheating. And so we actually put oil coolers outboard of the landing gear wells as well, and had new radiators made by Pacific down in Southern California. But we found that we ended up not needing the oil coolers in the outer part of the wing because the radiators work so well in this airplane that the overheating issue is practically non-existent. Another neat feature of the later model G10s is the Erla Hob canopy, which gets rid of the bars and the supports in the earlier canopies. It's a little bit lighter. And then and for better visibility. And then as you move farther aft, the tall tail, where you'll see the counterweight of the rudder goes through the vertical versus the short one, where their counterweight is part of the rudder itself, and it eclipses the vertical. And they did that because of crosswind conditions and a little bit better maneuverability. But those were some of the biggest challenges, other than installing the Allison engine for reliability, and that's the primary reason that we did it, so that we could fly it across the country from Oregon and display it for you today.
Thank you. All right. I think we've got 7 plus a little bit in terms of time to go. So I'm going to open it up, and I know there's going to be some questions out there. So we've got microphones for you guys. So hold on and go ahead and speak up.
Test one. I don't think, is this working?
It's
sounds
on.
Like
Yep,
it is.
You're talking.
Question to the restorers for both aircraft. Are there like shop manuals that exist today for these? And obviously the originals would be in German. So to even know how to restore this, what documentation did you go off of? Did you have the shop manuals? Were they translated?
We do. We have all the original German manuals that we know of. There are several manuals that were translated somewhere, I think in the UK, that we also acquired. We have a limited set of blueprints that have also helped, and those are invaluable. But yeah, we have a lot of documentation.
And then kind of second to that, I mean, in the pictures of the one that's running the Daimler-Benz engine, it looks like when they fished it out of the river or lake or whatever, it was, was it complete? This thing complete? Or I guess question for both of you: how much like in-house fabbing did you have to do on components to get these airworthy?
So for us, it was a little bit different in respect that it was in the Battle of Britain movie, like we had mentioned earlier, and it wasn't a flying airplane per se. It did have a lot of corrosion issues just for sitting for so long, but we did a lot of sheet metal work to the bottom of the wings, the tail section, and in between the landing gear underneath of the cockpit area. But as far as sheet metal, it's a pretty original Spanish Bouchon airframe, and then we from the firewall forward, everything underneath of the cowling is built from scratch.
I don't have a microphone, but I'm a loud guy. So, did you have, what about like subcomponents or systems, not just the sheet metal? Did you have to like take the drawings and have suppliers make these in present day?
We did have the blueprints just as they did, and we had not most things, but a lot of things remanufactured right to the print, as far as all the way down to the metallurgy, the type of metal, the grain structure, and all of that, so it would be functional.
I just want to thank you guys for one, the money that it costs to do this and the time. I've been coming to Oshkosh since 1978, and I've never seen an Me-109 ever physically here, and there's two of them here. And I think one year there was supposed to be an Me-109 and a Focke-Wulf 190 out of California, but for some reason they didn't make it. So again, thanks for bringing this. This is a real treat. I'm kind of a World War II historian guy. So. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. All right, Kyle's got one up there. There we go.
Question for Doc. The original fuselage, you were not able to use that in the restoration. Do you have any plans for that original fuselage?
Well, actually, we did use parts from the original fuselage, and a really good gentleman in Munich who is great at restoring fuselages from the war is obviously in his German shop. He took it upon himself to use as much of our original fuselage in the restored fuselage that we have now.
Okay, thank you. Kyle's got, we got one right here.
Paint schemes, and on the G6, is that a recreation of the original scheme? And on the G10, is that Hermann Graf?
That's correct, yes, Hermann Graf for the G10.
Okay.
Yeah, so the G6 here is, we had a lot of residual paint left on the airplane when it came out of the water. We also worked very hard with some modelers. Modeler guys are just off the charts with all this kind of detail. And so we actually hired a guy and he built a fantastic model after looking at all of our skins that we had laying out on the floor, and came up with this pattern. The wing pattern's slightly non-standard, but that's the way it was. So, yeah, and then also used the 4100 series serial number BF-109G-6s that had been photographed during the war, kind of threw those together, Erla-built airplanes. And this, according to the historians, is its most likely paint scheme. We certainly had the yellow on the chin cowling, and we had the yellow at the tail as well.
Okay. Up there. There we go. Okay.
Yeah, again, thanks for doing this. But I'm kind of curious on the early development. Were there prototype models, or did it come from something else? And what did they look like or compare to what we see?
All right, Kurt, you're on. Did you hear that question?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
There was a series of prototypes also housing smaller engines. The Daimler-Benz engine wasn't available right from the start of the Me-109's history. It first was powered by a Rolls-Royce Kestrel, but the Daimler-Benz engine was already under development, so it was meant to finally fit into the power the 109. Of course, there was a number of pre-series models, prototypes, and the like.
Okay, a follow-on to that is, how about other aerodynamic changes? Wingspan, did they change wingspan at all during its evolution?
Yeah, from the F series, from the Friedrich, the 109 had got rounded wingtips. They did not ever, to my knowledge, they never change the airfoil.
Okay.
The wing profile always remained the same, but the wing got rounded wingtips to make good for the induced drag at the end of the rectangular wings of the E series. Mm-hmm. So it went faster, it turned faster, it was more reliable, and that was one of the major changes of the wing.
Okay.
Another change, also Michael might elaborate on that, was due to the modification of the landing gear. They tried to improve the angle of the wheels with regard to the struts. So when you retracted the landing gear, the wings needed a bulge to house the wheels. You are standing right in front of it, General. So there you can see the bulge in the wing that houses the landing gear. That also came with the G series, I think. And that is why, and also for other reasons, giving the ammunition feeders for the heavier guns that were mounted on top of the wing. That is why from the G series on, the Me-109 was nicknamed the bump or the bulge by its pilots.
Okay. Thank you. All right. We got another question way in the back. Does he have a mic back there? Oh, okay, let's go over on this side then first. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. The G6 is equipped with a drop tank. Many years ago, I had the opportunity to ask Adolphe Galland about the combat endurance of 109s during the Battle of Britain. I said to him, "Did you have drop tanks?" His response was that the aircraft were fitted with drop tanks. The drop tanks had been tested and they worked wonderfully. However, in 1940, at the time of the Battle of Britain, they didn't have drop tanks. The supply system didn't make them available. Can you comment on that, please?
So I guess is that a question for me, I guess?
Yeah, I'd say go ahead.
Yeah, it's all true. It's all true. The combat endurance of the 109 was slightly above 1 hour. I mean, it had as the guys mentioned, it had something like 105 gallons tank, and it consumed in combat. In combat, it consumed about 100 gallons per hour. So when you were escorting bombers from France to London, you really had to keep an eye on your fuel gauge to make sure you make it home. And more than one pilot had to ditch in the channel. There were heavy losses of pilots who did not make it home over the English Channel.
Okay, thank you. All right, go ahead. Right there. I have it. Yep.
All right, so this is probably more of a tactical question regarding the 109, but I read that starting in 1944, when the Allied bombers were increasing in numbers, and obviously you had the P-51s coming into service, that along with the 109's counterpart, the Focke-Wulf 190, if and when possible, they would try to get both up in the air, and the 109s would be used to divert or distract the escorting fighters, while the more rugged 190s would attack the bombers. And my question is, were those tactics ever effective, or was it a case of futility where there were so many fighters that regardless of how many 109s or 190s were employed in that manner, were they ever effective against Allied bombers?
I think that is also a historical question, and Kurt may have some insight into that. I don't know the answer.
That was established air tactics by the German Luftwaffe to make good for the deficiencies of both airplanes. The Focke-Wulf had an optimum, how do you call that, pressure height for the engine of about 5,000 meters, that is 15,000 feet, whereas the Messerschmitt 109 was very good in high altitude combat. So, and also the Focke-Wulf 190 had an air-cooled radial engine, which was much more resistant to receiving hits. So it was an established tactics for the German Luftwaffe that the 190 units attacked the bombers, whereas the 109s were responsible for top cover and responsible for distracting the Allied fighters from the bomber units.
Okay, so right you were. Absolutely. Okay, over here again. Oh, Mr. Rausch.
I'm out of my normal position here. I'm a friend. I'm a friend.
No, ladies and gentlemen, this is Jack Rausch, and I will say no more. Obviously, the crowd knows you, Jack.
I prefer to be anonymous here, but I'm a friend of Kurt's, And I went to see Gunther in Germany, and I had many occasions in the United States to interact with him. A couple of things I think that people should know about Gunther, even this limited time we've got, is that he didn't receive the highest honor from the German from Hitler for his success in the air. He didn't get the swords and diamonds; he just got the swords. And it was also the case that when they were doing the editing of Kurt's book, and he was picking all the pictures that went in the book, I was present, and he gave me a look at the pictures, and he would he had like little Kodak pictures, and he would comment on what was happening with the person on the picture, and then he would lose a tear, and he would go to the next picture and lose a tear. All the people were dead that he was talking about, and one of the things that come out of one of the many symposiums I prepared with him is that he had the same emotion toward doing the things that were good for his homeland and his family that the American pilots did, and for that reason he became good friends with many of us.
Thank you, Jack. And later, if you weren't here yesterday, Bud Anderson was our guest, and later this afternoon, I do believe Bud is going to be doing a walk around with these gentlemen here, I think with Doc, around an Me-109. It could be very interesting to watch a P-51 ace walk around an Me-109, so I can hardly wait for that. All right, other questions? Oh, here we go. Karen?
My question has to do with pilot training. How many hours flying time did new pilots have to have before they went to the 109 in the early stages of the war? And then how many hours did they have later towards the end of the war? What's the difference in experience?
Yeah, I can answer very briefly on that. Post-war, pre-war pilots, of course, received an excessive training that was largely comparable to the training Bud Anderson had received. I think Bud was shipped to Europe with something like 400 hours in total under his belt. Most of them, of course, in fighters. And that was also pre-war fighter training in Germany. From 1943 on, training was cut all the while due to fuel shortages and other reasons. And in the last 12 to 15 months of the war, an average fighter pilot who came to the front line had something like 100 hours in total, 15 hours on type. And the loss rate was just like that. At the end of the war, that is in the last 12 months of the war, only 1 of 10 pilots survived his first 5 missions.
Wow. 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 Okay, another question up front here. Go ahead.
My question's more for the Midwest guys. I know you said earlier that you won't be flying the aeroplane during the air show, but is there a chance that we can hear it on the ground with an engine run at some point this week?
To be determined, as they say.
So just to add to that, I'm obviously from the UK, and I've heard Daimler-Benz 605s before, and they sound absolutely phenomenal. And the guys, if they do get a chance to run it, it sounds phenomenal. It doesn't sound anything like a Merlin or an Allison.
And it feels different in the airplane too. It just has a really nice, wonderful, deep rumble to it. If I can add one thing from before about the fuel, someone had a great fuel question. And that was one of the Achilles heels of all the early fighters in World War II was fuel and range. And as you go through a war, you anticipate what you need. And, of course, day one, you don't have what you need. Jack and Jay were nice enough to visit me about 10 or 15 years ago in San Antonio. And he took off in his Mustang with Jay in the back, and they flew direct to Chino, nonstop, in the Mustang. You can put, close to 500 gallons in it. and these have 100.
Yeah.
So I'm sure there's situations where, I mean, it's always nice unless you're on fire to have too much gas. But when they flew over Europe, when we had the idea on drop tanks too. And we thought about them too, and we were running out of range too in 42 and 43. Our bombers got there in 42, and our loss rates in 43 were pretty substantial because our fighters would go a certain distance, and then they had to come back because they were on their, of course, only internal, no aerial refueling, of course. So obviously the Germans would be smart and wait to that range until they turned and then descended upon them. And of course, once we got ideas on drop tanks, even with drop tanks, the P-47 and P-38, I'm not sure were nearly as efficient as the Mustang. And it's been said, the Mustang helped shorten the war several months because they could fly all the way to Berlin, fight, and then fly all the way back, all on gas of their own.
Yep. And by the way, we've got Lucky Luckadoo, who's going to be here Saturday morning, the author of the book, Damn Lucky, B-17 pilot from World War II, who did those missions, was escorted by the P-51s, and he made his 25 missions and made it home. He'll be here Saturday morning, and it should be a very, very interesting interview with him. All right, Kyle, up top there, we got another question.
So I've read that the 605 was derated in terms of power output fairly early in its life, but I could never find out why. Do you guys have any insight to that?
Do you guys have any idea? Derated?
No, it'd be nice if Mike Nixon knew about that. The 605s came in an Alpha and a Bravo, and they had different reduction gear cases in the front, and I'll just stop talking.
Maybe, Kurt, did you know anything about a derating of the motor of the 605? Did they derate it that you know of?
Yes, I know, but don't ask me for the reasons why.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Another question down front here. Oh. Hold on. We need a mic. We're working on it.
Is it on now?
Yep, you got it now.
When it comes to the restorations, was there one specific part that stands out in your memory from each build that was like either for a technical reason or for another reason just stands out to you that was difficult?
For us, from the very beginning, converting all of our procedures from American to German was our difficult step. I mean, we had to retool for a different angle of rivet. We had to retool for different diameters because it's all metric. We had to co-op with the Collings Foundation on a complete set of appropriate DIN rivets. So our goal from the beginning was to make it as completely German as possible. We didn't incorporate any AN American hardware. So that alone just really had us thinking, what are we doing? But going forward, it may be more difficult to maintain the airplane if something breaks. It's a fitting that we just can't go get. We may have to make it. That's just something that Doc's accepted, and we're going to make it happen.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you, Doc.
Even though we have the drawings and everything like that with the aircraft, having to translate everything since it's a Bouchon from Spanish into English, and then, like they were saying, the metric spec versus the standard. And then plating was another big one that we found. Sending the hardware out to get stripped and replated, and a lot of times if the plating wasn't done to the DIN spec, they would do it to the United States mil spec, then it wouldn't fit back into the hole that it came out of. So then we would have to work through that issue as well, and that was really challenging.
Yeah, we found that early on. We thought, oh, well, most of the hardware appeared to be black. We'd set it out, got it CAD plated, brought it back. We couldn't get nothing to fit. The precision was so tight that they didn't really do any plating. They just sort of, much like you buy, it's like a oxidized. Yeah, so we bought an oxidizing kit and stripped our hardware and oxidized everything.
Those darn Germans,
That was said many times.
All right, other questions? We got one over here. Go ahead.
For the guys flying the Daimler, and since you're flying it, what kind of TBO do you have on the engine?
Again, it would be great to have Mike Nixon here. I do believe that they are significantly reduced compared to the Merlins. And even the Merlins, I was told, I don't know if this is true, but like they throw them away at 200 hours, even if they were running good. And so they are very time intensive and need to pay attention to every single flight. The man hours per hour of flying is probably going to be pretty gosh darn significant.
Okay, got one at the top there. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, question about the cannon, how it's designed and how it fires through the spinner, if you could explain that. And the second question would be about the main landing gear, the camber, the angle of the tires. It seems very excessive.
Okay.
As you know, the gear is like that, so like we said, it could be transported really quickly, taken apart and gone to the front, and that's why they left the gear like that on the fuselage, so you could just unbolt the wings, put them on the side, and you don't have to touch the engine or the tailplane or anything. Just put it all together, put it on the rail car, and go. Take it off the rail car, put the wings on, and you go flying. And that's why they left them like that. So if they left the gear on the fuselage like that, they had to adapt, obviously, the geometry. And maybe Kurt can help me, too. I do believe they changed the geometry a little bit throughout the war on different types, and they actually had fatter tires on some of the squadrons that flew in tundra where they needed a fatter tire that made even bigger bulge on the wing, and they had to incorporate the angle so it would fit in the wing and not be exposed too much, but you can still see a little exposure. So to answer your question, it was predominantly for their ease of transport. Does he have any comments on the camber?
Any comments, Kurt, on the camber of the gear?
Yeah, not in detail, but it's perfectly right. The main landing gear had been reworked several times, also to make good for the constructive deficiencies of the whole thing. The longer war lasted, the more unexperienced the pilots were that were put on training in the 109, and the more difficult it became for an unexperienced, because the pilots were so unexperienced, to take off and land in that thing without really doing harm to it. I recall one story of a very experienced man who had 59 kills in the 109 only against Western Allies, and whose name was Julius Meinberg. And one day Julius was invited along with me to an air show in England at the Shuttleworth Collection, because they wanted to have an ace of the Battle of Britain. And all the planes in the Shuttleworth Collection were piloted by active Royal Air Force pilots who next Monday morning were to strap in their Phantoms and other and Jaguars and things. So after the show, they asked Julius Meinberg, "Sir, how many kills do you have?" And he said, "Yeah, well, I did not really count exactly, but I guess it was 59. "And did you ever have a dogfight with a Spitfire?" "Oh, yes, several." "And how many Spitfires did you shoot down?" And he said, "Well, something around 40. And for a minute, everything fell silent. And then he said, "But you know what? I crashed so many 109s on air talk and on takeoffs and landings that normally your king should have awarded me the Victoria Cross."
Thank you for that perspective. All right, we got one over here. Kyle.
The airframes that Connie Edwards had, those went to various buyers. Did you share any technology, parts, information, or with your restorations and those airframes? And can we expect more 109s to be restored from those owners?
Yeah, we didn't really share a lot. Those when they were bought out in a kind of a lump sum, they went to Europe and were dispersed around. Most of them have been restored to flying condition as Bouchons. I wouldn't say we really shared much with them. Much like the Midwest guys were saying, we dealt with a lot of modelers and a lot of other people in Europe who are kind of in the 109 world.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, we got one right here.
Yep. Ooh, you okay? Oh, okay. All right. Oh, is this? Oh, perfect. Okay, so I have a historical question about the 109 that I hope isn't too out of the box. But when it was first selected by the Luftwaffe, did it have to compete with other models of fighters? And if so, what were they? And how did the 109 win?
Good question. Go ahead, Kurt. You're the guy on that one.
Yeah, of course there was a competition against airplanes from Heinkel, from Arado, from all the major German manufacturers, and it was a tough competition. But still debate is going on. Why did the Me-109 win this competition? Because other airplanes, for example, had that wider track landing gear. Other airplanes seemed to have been aerodynamically smoother than the 109. For example, the Heinkel 112 had an elliptical wing like the Spitfire and was more of a dogfighter. So debate is still going on. Why did the 109 win? And all the records of these days have been lost in World War II. But it's my guess that it won finally because it was so easy to manufacture. And as Doc pointed out, it was easy to transport. It was rail and road transportable, and that really mattered in a war of movement that Hitler already had in his mind.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, we've got last question. We've got the last question, and yes, we have a youngster. Go ahead.
What's the fuel consist?
Fuel capacity compared to the Spitfire.
Fuel capacity compared to a Spitfire.
What's the fuel capacity compared to a Spitfire?
I believe the Mark 9 Spitfire, Mark 5 and 9, which are right around the time frame of these, it's pretty comparable. I think they hold like 115 or 120 gallons, and Doc says 108. Ours holds 105. So I think they're within 10 or 15 gallons of each other without drop tanks.
Okay, thank you very much. And with that, I'm going to wrap it up and say thank you, gentlemen, for what you've done. Thanks for the restoration, the acquisition. Thanks for the flying. Thanks for the expertise. And I'll say the same thing to you, Kurt. Thank you so much for your knowledge, your expertise, and your stories.
It was an honor to be with you. I wish I would be there in real life.
Thank you very much, and Connie and I plan to come visit. So with that, folks, again, thank you very much, and we'll be back here tomorrow morning, and we've got a Medal of Honor winner who is going to be here tomorrow.